Hey guys, today I want to take a look at the 2022 Senate elections for the 2022 midterms and take a look at the best case scenario for the Democratic Party. Now, this is more of a realistic scenario, so this is not going to be some sort of fantasy map. And this is the reason behind this is the Republicans, they're nominating some pretty horrible candidates in many of these races, while Democrats, they are nominating some pretty strong candidates with pretty strong incumbents. So the Democratic Party, as long as they do not lose any seats, they will retain their Senate majority, but there are definitely many places where the Democratic Party can make huge gains in, where Republicans are retiring and they're seemingly nominating some pretty weak candidates. So I'm going to start off by filling in all of these solid seats for the Democratic Party. These are basically the West Coast as well as the upper Northeast. I think all these states definitely going to be solid. There's no way that Republicans win in any of these. The state of Colorado as well, it's going to be a likely seat, but it's going to go to Michael Bennet. Michael Bennet running for re-election in 2022. There's no way that Republicans win here, but the margin for Michael Bennet is very, very unlikely to be too solid. Same thing for Arizona with Lisa Murkowski. Lisa Murkowski, although many of the Republicans on the Trump wing of the party do want to get rid of her, the establishment GOP is not too on board with that. They do not want to waste so much money defeating a Republican incumbent that is going to win. If Lisa Murkowski has no challenge, she's going to win. She is amazingly popular in the state of Alaska. She won a write-in campaign in 2010 when she wasn't even on the ballot. So I think that with Republicans trying to remove her, it's unlikely that it's even going to work, and it'd just be a waste of time and money. But I'm also going to add in some other solid Republican states. These are all seats that Republicans are going to win. The margins here, they're all very likely to be solid. Even in a state like South Carolina, Lindsey Graham only won it by around 11%, but Jamie Harrison, or not Jamie Harrison, I forgot what his name was. Tim Scott. Tim Scott is a lot more popular in South Carolina than is Lindsey Graham, so it's a little bit different for him there. In the state of Alabama, of course, there's a retiring Republican, but it's still going to be pretty solid for the GOP, as you saw with Tommy Tuberville defeating incumbent Doug Jones in 2020. So this was Democrats at an advantage, just starting off at 46 seats to the Republicans at 53. So I'm going to start off by taking a look at the race in Nevada. And before we get to that, make sure to join my Discord server if you have not. We have a pretty cool mock government in there, so make sure you join that if you haven't. The link to which is at the very top of the description below. So taking a look at the state of Arizona, this is Catherine Cortez Masto's seat. She is a Democrat in Nevada, first elected in 2016, and she is running for re-election in 2022. I think that it'll be a pretty strong race for her. She's an incumbent now, and she's mildly popular in Nevada. Nevada also does tend to be more of a Democratic state just in general. She was able to win around the same margin as Hillary Clinton in 2016, so around 2.4%. That was Catherine Cortez Masto's margin, and as an incumbent, I think she'll be able to do a little bit better. So Catherine Cortez Masto winning in Nevada, I think that's definitely very, very likely for her. And Republicans, unless they can field some really strong candidates, which the primary there really hasn't really begun, but unless they can stage some really good candidates, it's going to be a lead margin for Catherine Cortez Masto. Now, in the state of Arizona, this is another seat that I think Democrats are pretty strong in. This is the seat with Mark Kelly. So Mark Kelly, of course, the former astronaut and now senator in Arizona, he won the special election in 2020. He defeated Martha McSally, who was appointed by the governor to replace the late John McCain. So after John McCain passed away, Martha McSally, who, if you remember, lost to Kyrsten Sinema in 2018, she was appointed to fill John McCain's seat. So Martha McSally essentially gave the Democratic Party 2 seats in the Senate from Arizona. And Mark Kelly, I think he's definitely a very strong candidate. He won the state by 2 points higher than Joe Biden's margin. And Mark Kelly is also, I think, the stronger candidate out of him and Kyrsten Sinema. So Mark Kelly probably going to win his re-election by a pretty good margin. I don't think I would be worried for him. I think that it's going to be lean once again, and I think that definitely Arizona will be a pretty good seat for the Democrats just because of Mark Kelly as the Democratic nominee. So that puts Democrats now at 48 seats. I want to move on to the state of Iowa, which is a seat that definitely Republicans have the advantage in Iowa. So this is Chuck Grassley. Chuck Grassley running for re-election in 2022 is currently unclear. But in this scenario, this is, of course, the best case scenario for the Democratic Party, but this is a reasonable best case scenario. So for the Democratic Party, if Chuck Grassley does not run, that is going to be their best case scenario. Chuck Grassley has been there for decades. He's been there since the 70s, I believe. I think he joined the Senate around the same time that Joe Biden joined. I think a little bit after Joe Biden, actually, who, of course, joined in the early 70s. I believe 1972 was when Joe Biden joined the Senate. So Chuck Grassley was a little bit after that, 4 years after that. So Chuck Grassley has been in the Senate for almost, I think, a little bit over 40 years now. and it will be pretty hard for Chuck Grassley to lose. Although he's very old, he's still popular in Iowa. He doesn't have, the problem Dianne Feinstein had. Dianne Feinstein is actually older than Chuck Grassley, but Dianne Feinstein got a lot of, support for Kevin DeLeon, the Democrat that was running against her in 2018. So Chuck Grassley, he's likely to have, the full support of the Republican Party. He was, of course, the president pro temp, whenever the Republicans controlled the Senate. But Chuck Grassley, if he does not run, the state will still be pretty solidly for the Republican Party. But I'm going to put it as likely for right now if Chuck Grassley doesn't run, just because it's a little bit more difficult for someone new to be doing so well. And of course, you saw Teresa Greenfield lost to Joni Ernst here by just 7%. So it's nowhere near a solid margin for the GOP in Iowa without Chuck Grassley. The state of Missouri, I'm actually going to put as a likely race here because, of course, again, if the Democrats get their way, the Republicans will nominate Eric Greitens for this seat. Eric Greitens, of course, was the former governor of Missouri who had to resign due to sexual harassment allegations, sexual misconduct. And last time the Republicans nominated someone like this, it was Roy Moore in Alabama, and they lost to Alabama. So I think that definitely Democrats have a good chance here if Eric Greitens is nominated. And if you look at the trend here, Eric Greitens is this line right here. His chances have been increasing more and more over the last couple of weeks here. So Eric Greitens definitely is possible. He'll be popular among the GOP, but among independents and Democrats, it'll be very unlikely that they actually vote for him. But Missouri has become more and more of a redder state. But it's still less red than Alabama. That's true. But I think that Missouri will be a little bit more solid for them than it was for Roy Moore. I think Roy Moore was, an even worse candidate than Eric Greitens will be in Missouri. So that will be another seat for the Republican Party, now at 45. Next up, I want to take a look at the state of Ohio. Now, this was Rob Portman's seat. Whoever the Democratic and Republican nominees will be here, it's still a little bit unlikely or a little bit unknown right now for who will win those primaries in Ohio, but Rob Portman is retiring, and that is not good for the Democratic Party. He won his first race in 2010 when this was an Obama state. Obama carried the state by 8%, I believe, in 2010. So this was a solid state for the Democratic Party on the presidential level, but Rob Portman was able to defeat Lee Fisher here by a pretty strong margin of around 17 percentage points. So Rob Portman was good for Ohio. 2016, this is when Trump won Ohio, and this was a blowout for Rob Portman. So Rob Portman won 58% of the vote here, so an even stronger margin for the incumbent now, and he won the seat by over 20%. So Rob Portman definitely was a good senator for Ohio, and he was pretty popular there as well. But with him retiring because of how toxic politics has gotten, how hard it is to get things done in the Senate, he is retiring, and that will make Democrats think that they can win, but really it's pretty unlikely. I think in the best case, it's going to be lean. Ohio is a little bit less red, in my opinion, than Iowa. So for the state of Ohio, I think definitely that if Democrats can nominate someone good and Republicans nominate a little bit of a weaker candidate, it can be lean, but really it's very unrealistic for Democrats to win there in the state of Ohio. Now, the next state I want to take a look at is the state of Florida. So this is Marco Rubio's seat. Marco Rubio is pretty popular in Florida. He's a senior senator from the state, and it's unlikely that he's really going to lose. He won in 2016 by a pretty strong margin. He won re-election in 2016 by 8 percentage points. In 2010, he won his first election. There was a three-way race, so he won pretty solidly in the state of Florida. However, it's pretty unlikely that Marco Rubio is unseated in 2022, nor will Ivanka Trump replace her as the Republican nominee. She's really probably not going to run. There was talk about Ivanka Trump running for this seat. I think she could do well, but I think it's pretty unlikely that she defeats Marco Rubio in the Republican Party primary, nor does the establishment Republicans want this to happen. So Marco Rubio, I think in the best case scenario, and this is definitely very possible, Marco Rubio wins Florida with a lean margin, so a little bit less than he did in 2016, which is definitely very, very likely. But I think that Marco Rubio will still be pretty much a shoo-in for the GOP in the state of Florida. Now, I do also want to take a look at the state of New Hampshire now. So New Hampshire will be a surprisingly close race. Of course, you remember in 2020, Jean Shaheen won her race in Nevada by a solid margin of over 16 percentage points. Maggie Hassan, the Democrat here, is not Jean Shaheen. Jean Shaheen is definitely the much better candidate, but Maggie Hassan will face a lot of trouble if he runs against Chris Sununu. So Chris Sununu is the Republican governor of this state. He's pretty popular, and New Hampshire holds these gubernatorial elections every 2 years. So 2020, Chris Sununu won 65% of the vote. 2018, he won 52%. 2016, he won 48%. So he's been improving over the last 6 years. And then the state in 2014 actually elected Maggie Hassan. So this was before Hassan went to the U.S. Senate in 2016. So this was her final term. So she was the governor before Chris Sununu. And Chris Sununu, although the polling does show him a little bit in front of Maggie Hassan right now, that doesn't really mean too much because of how early it is. But I think that as the incumbent and just as the Democrat in a Democratic state, I think Maggie Hassan definitely does come in with the advantage. So I'm going to give her this state with a tilt margin. I think definitely Chris Sununu will do very well here, but I think that she still definitely does have the upper hand in New Hampshire. The next state I want to take a look at is the state of Georgia. So in the state of Georgia, this of course is Raphael Warnock's seat. He was elected in 2020 in the Georgia Senate special election, defeating Raphael Warnock. Raphael Warnock defeated Kelly Loeffler in 2020. And 2020 was a pretty interesting race here. But for 2022, Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue, the two senators that lost the Senate for the Republican Party, they were the ones that lost against Raphael Warnock and then Jon Ossoff. So they're very unlikely to win the GOP primaries in 2022, nor is Brian Kemp, who will face a pretty tough re-election with Stacey Abrams if she does run. But for Doug Collins, she currently has a 46-cent share of winning. Herschel Walker, he's a former NFL player. Georgia does typically like that, but 17 cents per share. But Doug Collins, of course, he's the one that came in third in the Georgia Senate special election. So he was another Republican that ran against Kelly Loeffler and then Raphael Warnock. He ended up losing on the regular ballot. He's the one that triggered that runoff, and of course he endorsed Kelly Loeffler there. So for Doug Collins, I think that he's pretty much going to be the nominee. He was second in 2020 for the GOP, and he's a pretty accepted successor to Kelly Loeffler there now. So for Doug Collins, I think definitely that he will do a little bit better than Raphael Warnock, which is why I'm going to give this state as a tilt state. For Warnock, I think Warnock definitely is a pretty good candidate. And 2022, as an incumbent, I think he'll do a little bit better. But I think that against Doug Collins, and considering the fact that it's expected to be a little bit more of a Republican wave year, I think it'll be a pretty weak wave. So I think that I'll put Georgia as a tilt state right here for Raphael Warnock. And then in the state of North Carolina, so North Carolina, 2016, Richard Burr was reelected. So Richard Burr is the incumbent. He has chosen that he'll retire in 2022. 2010, this was the first election of Richard Burr. So Richard Burr, 2008, of course, North Carolina was a blue state. And Richard Burr has been doing relatively well for a Republican. He's been actually doing pretty well for a Republican in the state of North Carolina. Not exactly the strongest margins, but he's been winning by pretty good margins that are pretty comfortable for him. In 2022, it'll be a struggle for the GOP because they no longer have that incumbency factor. And I think that 2020, without Kyle Cunningham being such a dumb person and having that scandal, I think Kyle Cunningham definitely could have defeated Tom Tillis. But in North Carolina, without that, if Democrats can nominate a better candidate that, just won't get himself into scandals, I think definitely the Democrats can win here. And on a good night for the Democrats, I think it can definitely be a tilt margin in favor of the Democratic Party. Now, next, I want to take a look at the state of Pennsylvania. So Pennsylvania, this, of course, is where Pat Toomey is the incumbent. He has announced pretty early that he's not going to be running for re-election, and he currently has a very, very strong chance at giving up this seat for the Democrats. So 2022, this is the betting odds for Pennsylvania. And in Pennsylvania, the Democrats have a 63-cent share. The Republicans only have a 39-cent share. So essentially what this is John Fetterman. So John Fetterman is pretty much the expected Democratic nominee. He's a lieutenant governor of Pennsylvania, and he's very, very popular in the state. I think definitely with him on the ballot as the Senate nominee for the Democrats, he can definitely do very good things for the Democratic Party. And if he doesn't run against some extraordinary Republican candidate, I think the race is just going to go to him. This is a Democratic state, and Democrats have, already have a senator here. They have a Democratic governor. The the government here is controlled by the Democrats. So I think that for John Fetterman, I think it can definitely be within the lean range for him if he does win the Democratic primary, which he is currently pretty much expected to do so. And then finally, the last state on this map is here Wisconsin. Now, this is Ron Johnson, and we're going to assume that Ron Johnson does not run for re-election because that will be the better case for the Democratic Party. Now, Ron Johnson, he has said that his preference right now is to not run for re-election in 2022. But he's gone back on his word. In 2016, he said that he was not going to run in 2022. He has since taken those words back, and now he says that his preference is still to not run for re-election, but he's not ruling it out yet. So for Ron Johnson, because of that, he does currently have the lead in the betting odds by just a pretty small margin. It's been a very, very small margin between the two for a pretty long time here. But Ron Johnson, he's been able to win pretty narrowly in Wisconsin. Not the best of margins, but definitely someone that if he runs into 2022, can definitely still win a third term. But I think that it's pretty unlikely now that he does run. I think there's a higher chance that he chooses to retire. And so for that, the Republicans are going to have a lot of trouble because this is to say that Joe Biden won on the presidential level. So I'm going to put this as a tilt state with the assumption that Ron Johnson is not going to run. So this is my final Senate map for the best case scenario for the Democratic Party. Democrats winning 53 seats, the GOP had 47. So the seats that the Democrats will be flipping here, all these seats in North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, all in the case where these incumbent Republicans retire. Pennsylvania's Pat Toomey, in North Carolina's Richard Burr are already retiring, but in Wisconsin, it's pretty likely right now that Ron Johnson does retire. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure you join my Discord server if you haven't. We have a pretty cool mock government on there, so make sure you join that link at the top of the description below. Like this video if you enjoyed it. Comment down below who you think will win in the 2022 midterms, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't. Thank you guys so much again for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.